Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Recording Drums podcast with Blair Sinta. If you enjoy this podcast, please give it a rating on your favorite podcast player, Apple, Spotify, whatever it might be. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe or share and or both. Today, my guest is Dylan Wissing. Dylan has recorded with Alicia Keys, John Legend, Eminem, Drake, you name it. Sounds like a good company of people, if you ask me. He's also gone very deep into getting the sound for the funky drummer, and has some incredible insights on that. So if you go to Dylan's website, you can dive deep on his series called Getting the Sound. Dylan and I have a certain kinship on getting drum sounds, and we go a little deeper in this interview than I've gone with most people. Just his background. His education, things like that. But we do get into the recording thing in there, and there's a lot of amazing insight that he gives through his process. So without further ado, enjoy the interview with Dylan Wissing. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I feel I'm recording already, so fuck it.
Yeah.
I feel a kinship with you, man, because I feel like we've gone down some similar paths.
I feel precisely the same. It's funny you say that. Yeah, I went back and I'd heard your talk on my friend, our mutual friend Nick Raffini's Drummers Resource,
Mm-hmm.
and I went back and saw your latest one, and man, every single word of what you said, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm like, yeah, trying to figure out, I know. I know your story as mine, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, man. So, how long have you been in Nashville?
Oh no, I'm in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Well, I've barely ever been to Nashville in my life.
Okay, well, there we go. Right on. Are you a born and bred New Jerseyan?
No, I'm from Indiana originally. I'm born and raised in Bloomington, Indiana, where Indiana University is.
Oh wow.
Funny.
And you're like post Sean Pelton, Indiana too.
Yeah. So Sean was. I started studying. I started with Kenny Aronoff when I was. I had my first lesson with Kenny when I was in 8th grade. My parents and Kenny were friends.
Oh wow.
And so that was actually the first time I ever recorded. It was probably 1983, 1984. Kenny had a home studio in his basement and a little 8-track tape machine. So he was working on something, and he had a brake drum, and I was hitting the brake drum. That was the first time I ever actually recorded myself, and it was really cool. So in high school, I started studying with Sean when he was a student at IU, jazz studies student.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, he was an absolute badass back then.
Yeah.
So, and Sean at the time was studying with Kenny. So I was kind of getting Kenny's lessons secondhand filtered through Sean. And when Sean left Bloomington to come to New York, I took over, his teaching and some other stuff.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, that question was totally unprompted with all that, so that's awesome to know.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was Bloomington really is an amazing town. I mean, there's so many incredibly talented people that come there from all over the world. So
yeah,
you're really thankful to have grown up there.
There's actually a professor there now, as of the past couple of years. This guy Joe Gramley, who's a marimba guy and stuff. He was at University of Michigan. I have connections to the University of Michigan from growing up in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
Taught there, but Joe's there now, and I've known him since I was 12.
Right.
We do very different things, but he's an incredible percussionist.
Yeah. I believe it. You don't you can't be a slack and
get
on the faculty there. So
yeah, very cool. All right, so I mean that usually leads me to my first question. Like, when did you start recording? How'd you get into it? But like that's Kenny. Wow,
Kenny Aronoff's home studio basement.
Amazing. And, did he do things for Mellencamp out of there ever? Like demo stuff? Do you know?
Possibly. I don't know. I don't think he was in that house terribly long. Yeah, I'm not sure. I was just down there the one time for that session. But yeah, that was eye opening, and it was cool to turn on TV and there's Kenny on Saturday Night Live or whatever, and it sort of one of the problems was that it made it to, oh, how hard can it be? Kenny's doing it. I want to do it too.
Right. It's a direct path. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's so you just do the ABC and then there you are.
Right, right.
So
What? So were you having recording experience at IU?
no, not at all. No, I started as a jazz studies major, and at the time the school was really classically oriented,
Mhm.
and which I was not at all.
Okay.
And I was pretty hard headed, and I didn't want to do things the right way. I wanted to do things my way, and or the smart way. So I, yeah, it was not a good fit, and so I probably the best thing that came out of my 2 years of as a jazz studies major is I played a lot of salsa and
Okay.
played congas in a salsa band for a couple of years with a family from Puerto Rico who are insanely talented. And,
Wow.
the leader had won a Grammy for his salsa arranging, I believe, and
Okay.
so that was really cool. And played some jazz, but it was getting to the point where by 2 years into the school, I was starting to hate jazz, and I knew that was not how I wanted to feel about music that I really really deeply love. So I
Right.
ended up as a French major and actually played a lot more drums as a French major. It was a
Wow.
really
Where did that come
mediocre. Um, I had gone to my senior year of high school. I did I'd taken high school French, and I have some French background from going back to about 1704 in Vincennes, Indiana, when my ancestors arrived to
from?
trap for fur. But senior year of high school, I did the foreign exchange program and connected with my buddy Hervé, who's in Lyon, France, and Hervé's family is from Cameroon, West Africa. So um, I got you know I got really into hanging out with Hervé and speaking French, West African pop. When he and I went back and forth a lot, I was actually supposed to go to Cameroon with his family when I was in college. I had just started college, and the trip ended up falling through, which I've always been bummed about. But
Okay. Okay.
yeah, so basically, I just kind of learned it by hanging out with my buddy and his family and friends in France, and kind of the day I graduated, that was really the last time I'd used it, aside from touring France,
Right.
and being able to speak enough to
Right.
not get arrested or whatever.
That's crazy. So a couple things. First of all, my kids speak French because they go to a
Oh,
French immersion program just totally
right,
randomly, you know. So
awesome.
that's pretty cool. But um, so have you ever met Armand Sabadleko or Andre Manga, bass players,
No,
Cameroon
no,
cats? Okay.
no.
Armand played like in the Brecker Brothers
Okay.
and the Paul Simon the
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Paul Simon.
The
Yeah,
concert and the part. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay.
and
Yeah.
Armand, sorry, and Andre plays bass with Josh Groban, and I toured with him a little bit,
Okay.
and it was interesting me touring with Andre. He turned me on to some of that, some of that, some of that. I mean I'm a little ignorant of it about it, but so you say West African,
For me, it's Makossa, Sukus, and then some of the West Indian stuff, Zyko if you go on, search up. There's some great Spotify playlists of just Makossa or Sukus,
okay,
uh, or Zouk from the West Indies. And everything's that
okay,
kind of based on that feel with the driving kick,
yep,
and man, it is some of the grooviest music on the
yeah,
planet.
yeah,
I cannot get enough of it.
yeah. So yeah, he turned me on to the blanking on the name Letet.
Oh, the tête brûlée?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, and that middle triplet thing. Like I went hard into that for a little while because I was like, wow, I don't know how to play that correctly. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And like all that stuff. Because Andre would do this thing where we'd be sitting in the dressing room before the gig, and he'd pick up an acoustic guitar, and he would start playing something, and he would ask everybody, "Where's one?" And it would never be where you think it is, and
Right, right,
it
right.
he just had incredible time and just an incredible sense of melodic sense, and you know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, yeah, that. So for me, it was sort of studying Baroque harpsichord pieces while trying to listen to Makosa and
Right.
Sukus and thinking, I sure don't care about, you know, I,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know the
like I
first.
said,
I understand the frustration. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I wish I hadn't been so hard headed back in those days. Um,
But I'm sure that hand percussion must have totally translated into what you do now.
yeah, I mean, yeah, trying to figure all that stuff out, and yeah, I mean, and being exposed to music from every corner of the planet, including Baroque harpsichord music,
Right. Right.
that's a great thing, and I think the more of that you get, the better musician, better
Right.
human you're going to be.
Of course. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Do you feel like that translated into like some of your R&B chops at all? Like knowing that salsa stuff and
a little bit, uh,
right? You
maybe
said
not.
Cuban. You said you played with a Cuban.
No, from Puerto Rico.
Oh, Puerto Rico. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, for me, the feel was always when that. I mean, when the rhythm section got going, it was just this machine. The the three of us together. I mean, there's just the. It wasn't so much the feel thing for me. It wasn't the feel like an old school R&B or a soul feel are a very different thing from a salsa feel, which is very just
Right.
barreling forward. So that didn't translate. But so many of those classic R&B and funk and soul tracks have congas all over them or bongos or whatever. So that's a huge thing for me. I'm so glad I had the chops to be able to at least figure out. I had to recreate ABC by the Jacksons once, and I mean the congas on that are serious. I don't know who was playing on it, but
Hmm.
um, I mean it took me a couple of days to try to figure out what they're playing and then practice it enough and tune it enough to be able to create some semblance of it. So, um,
Right. Because that would have been an LA studio guy, right?
yeah, yeah, I would like to find out who that was because I mean, whoever that is a badass.
I'm sure like Luis Conte or one of those knows immediately whoever that was.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you find out, please let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Cool. Right on. So then, did you go straight to? Did you go to New York right after IU?
No, not at all. I so in college, I joined a band or formed a band with some other guys in 1990, a band called Johnny Sacco, and it was kind of it started as this a joke basically. It was just a funk, disco, ska goofball band, and it kind of got really popular in the area really quick.
Okay.
And back in the day when I mean there were big clubs and you could play 3 or 4 nights in a row at these clubs, and you know everyone would come, everyone would pay cover. You walk out with this wad of cash, it's like, oh my god, this is incredible. This is what I want to do. Um, for me, the sprint was to get out of college as soon as I possibly could, so that we could go on the road and I could be done, and just focus on that. So that it started as a joke, as this goofy cover band, and with silly outfits, and that was kind of all the rage back in those days. We're
Right.
heavily influenced by Fishbone,
Right.
um, and we started doing our own original stuff, and kind of got tied into this the ska movement that was kind of building in the mid early to mid '90s,
Yeah.
and we just toured the states nonstop for 13 years, from 1990 to 90 or 90 to 2000 at the end of 2002, and
Okay.
or well, it's I guess 12 years. Um, and I mean, a bunch of dudes in a beat up 15 passenger van with a trailer,
Yep.
sleeping on floors, playing shows everywhere, trying to market ourselves, trying to make it, and we never really did. It
Did
ran its course.
Did you come through Denton and play with like Ten Hands or Mingo Fish Trap or there's one other band I'm totally blanking.
No, no,
No, doesn't
we
sound
only did
familiar.
a couple Texas trips.
Okay,
Uh, that's funny. Yeah, there was a whole.
because there was those early '90s bands like Ten Hands was like huge. Matt Chamberlain was the original drummer, and then Earl
Okay.
Harvin, and then this guy. I'm totally blanking. Mike. Anyway, another incredible drummer.
Okay.
Anyway, there was that whole scene of like just that early '90s like Fishbone, Chili Peppers,
Yep.
whatever.
Crazy outfits.
Yeah.
Yeah, a whole bunch of styles mishmashed together.
Yeah.
Um, actually, if I was going to
Good.
say, if more than anything, that was probably what brought me where I am today. The Fishbone influence, Fish on drums was one of the most amazing drummers I know of.
Hmm.
And uh, and just the way they would pull all these different styles together. So we don't try to do it ourselves and figure out how do we, sound like an actual metal band or an actual funk band or an actual polka band or whatever.
Right.
Um, combine with a lot of those, sort of those classic hip hop records with,
Okay.
Paul's Boutique, 3 Feet High Rising, Low End Theory, where, pulling these incredible samples from all these different sources. So that all that variety um, has kind of always stuck with me. Not that I'm trying to be a metal drummer anymore, and um, I for a long time I was basically trying to be Fish, the drummer Fish, meets Kenny Aronoff, and tried to do Fish as loud as I possibly
Right.
could.
Okay.
Um,
That's a good question. That was actually leading to me what I was going to ask you. First of all, did you record much with this band?
yeah, we did some records.
Okay.
The Probably the biggest thing we got out of it, we they're out there.
It
You
was
know,
was it do you kind of think back at those recording processes now and think like, wow, I had no idea what the hell I was doing,
yeah.
or were they super, or were they actually informative to where you are now?
I learned a lot about what not to do.
Okay.
I definitely I had some insight from, I talked to Kenny about, hey, how do you record a drum and go to his clinics, and Sean was kind of long gone by then, but or before he left town, we would do a little bit of recording, on a cassette recorder or whatever, and talk about recording stuff. So I wasn't totally clueless, and the drums they're okay.
Right.
Um, it's but I think the biggest thing I learned, and something that really kind of screwed us for several years over, mid '90s, thinking, oh my God, ska is huge, and we need to put out a ska record, and we need to go all in, and just gonna do it. We're gonna do it. So we at the time we spent, I think it was 20 grand, and we put it on credit cards and went to the studio and like, oh, we got to do it. It's got to be this amazing record. Um, and It took forever to pay that off, and we were so stuck with that stupid credit card debt back in the '90s when we were, scrambling for we had no money, and playing these gigs all over the country, and fans always bring down, blah 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 blah.
Right.
The one hand of we just spent way too much money, which we couldn't have afforded, and that was a bad idea in retrospect. And the other thing was the mix process with that band was always, we didn't have a producer; it was just the band producing ourselves. So get in the studio, track the song, and then it's time to mix it, and we would each stand in the control room with the engineers at the board and say, okay, can you make my sounds bigger and fatter and louder and brighter and lower, and then the next guy, okay, I want my, and you end up with mud, absolute mud.
Right.
So, and then the engineers would be try to, okay,
Trying to please everybody. Yeah. Turn me
yeah,
up. Yeah.
like they'd send us away, and
Yeah.
actually, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah, that was funny. So that was a lot of recording, and some of it too was the live show. I mean, we were a better live band. Live, it was an amazing band. In the studio, the songs didn't always translate. So we got better over the years. But another thing, another really something I learned back in those days, which took a while to sink in, and was only really leaving the band that I kind of the lessons fully formed in my head of people would, we were loud, aggressive, as hard as we could, constantly, no matter the room. That was our sound. Which, ah!
Yep. Yep.
And people would say, "I can't hear the vocals. I can't hear the vocal. I wanted whatever." I remember it was Michigan. It wasn't in our Kalamazoo. There was a place. It was down a huge place, 2 levels, down a huge flight of stairs. I'm sure it was going when you were there, um, right by the campus. Anyhow, so giant concrete basement and divided in 2 halves. One half had the stage, the other half had a bar, and the bar was packed. And we were playing to about 5 people. And on our break, the manager came out next door and said, "Hey, you guys, people are listening. People are enjoying the music, but it's so loud. You can't, it's just so loud, and you can't hear the music, whatever. You can't hear the vocals. You know, could you guys turn down? I mean, you probably get more." We were so mad and so offended. Just,
Right.
how dare you? That's our sound!" And oh my God, we were
Right.
furious and
Right.
stormed off in a huff. And he was right.
Yeah.
Like, why? Why were we so stupid?
Right. Right. Well, that's just being young and having too
Oh
much
yeah,
testosterone, right?
yeah.
But to me, it's interesting. Especially when you're like mentioning like playing like tribe songs and being influenced by like the boom bap stuff, and
Hmm.
like it's like now, and I know this from watching you play like you know through the internet. It's like it's not about hitting anywhere near that hard and learning how to create those sounds. And like when did that start to dawn on you? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that band ran its course, and I reconnected with my college girlfriend who was living in Hoboken, New Jersey, and so I left Indiana, came out here in about 2003, and I started working with Ken Lewis, who's a huge hip hop pop producer mixer. He's
Okay.
got 100 gold and platinum records.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working with him as a session drummer, and that was when I first came upon this idea of sample recreations, which I knew nothing. I'd never heard about it, didn't know anything about it, and it was incredibly eye-opening. Just saying, okay, we have to make whatever you have to make today sound like that record that was, and it doesn't matter how you get it. I mean, I couldn't care less. This is a can. I couldn't care less what drums you use, how whatever. It does it sound like it or does it not? And that's the only thing that matters. And that's kind of when I started realizing, oh yeah, if I slam it,
Mm-hmm.
it's just all attack and there's nothing there. But if I really tap it and oh yeah, that actually does sound like
Right.
the record. So
Right.
that was part of it. Trying to replicate the Funky Drummer, which I mean that's been my Moby Dick.
Right.
I mean, because that breakbeat is so huge, and it's like, oh wow,
Right.
and try to do my usual shit. The the more I play it, I can't play it quietly enough. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm getting closer, but
Right.
it just barely. And then it sounds right. It sounds like Clyde.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was and another big in that same period. It was a really formative period for me. As a studio musician, working with Ken, watching Ken just dissect a mix and be able to surgically pick out some tiny aspect of some tiny element of this huge song which had 100 tracks,
Mm-hmm.
and say, oh, that one thing up in the corner of this mix, that side of the speaker it's got too much high end or whatever. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't at the time. Like, what are you listening to? There's just so much sound coming at me. How do you know? And he's done it forever, and like, yeah,
Right.
it's easy.
Right.
So it was learning that was a skill, and trying to figure out, well, how do you get that skill? And
Right. So he was super huge to opening up your ears.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So and then Billy Ward. I took 2 lessons with Billy Ward, the drummer,
Okay.
and those 2 lessons, I think those 2 lessons in a lot of ways, and I've told Billy this. I think those gave me a career. It was because it was talking, working with Ken and saying Ken's not a drummer. He's an
Right.
engineer and a mixer and a producer,
But
but
it's
he does.
interesting to me that like he saw that you were obviously had good feel, even though you may have been inexperienced in that sense, that you would pull it off. If he
Yeah,
tells you like, hey, we need to do this, that you'll physically as a player be able to pull it off, and obviously the feel's got to be there too, which is
right.
pretty pretty big.
But that's funny. So that was what the lesson with Billy was. I was going to Billy saying, how do I get these sound? How do I play like this and really loud and whatever. And remember the first lesson he was putting in earphones or earplugs, like, yeah, you are really loud. That's true. Um,
Right.
but
You're really good at that. Yeah.
yeah, okay, you made
Yeah.
your point. Um, but he was just talking about take a measure of music and dice, dissect every single thing you possibly can and become that measure of music. For him, the example was Bernard Purdy, and I think he was talking about having to program a drum machine to sound like Bernard Purdy. Back in the '90s when it was a digital drum machine or something, and saying he learned so much from that experience
Wow.
of trying to program every little detail on a little I don't know, a Kai or something.
Right.
Press the little pads and nudge the little uh, and so for him it was just, who cares what you have to do, figure it out, you just figure it out. which is great. And that sort of set me on a path. The one thing that I regret at the same time, because I've spent pretty much most of the last 20 years trying to figure out how to do that. The one thing that it sort of gave me a pass on, which now I'm kind of regretting, is I sort of stopped working on technique. I just kind of stopped shedding new stuff because it was all about, how do you get these sounds in the studio? And I talked to Ken about it, saying, well, should I be working on chops and fills? And when I'm like, not for me. I don't want to hear that shit. Um, and so I'm glad in the sense of, so I always practice stuff with the metronome really slow and 40 BPM and just try to make it sound good, feel good. I never really got it. Well, I should get it up to 162. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like I really come I can play slow and quietly in my sleep.
Right.
But when it's time for when there are no shows and life is just here's some chops on Instagram. I don't know. I get nothing.
I'm like cracking up because that's exactly what happened to me. And when Ringo finally dawned on me,
Yeah.
and like listening to Stevie Wonder, like the idea of like playing on a pad for me went out the window.
Right.
I was like, who cares? It doesn't matter
Right.
to me anymore.
Right.
And I spent a lot of years only playing on a pad to simply get my hands warmed up. And then I was like, I was like a Vinny freak and like a jazzer in college. And then I really I let my hands go a lot. You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Right.
it really worked for me for a long time. But like now I miss it. And I've actually found it probably way more productive in musical ways to work on chops. But there
Mm-hmm.
are things that I want to have happen certain there. And that doesn't mean I'm going to start to use them in recording
Right.
just as a self-satisfaction player thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's become important to me again. But I went through a similar thing. I was like it, and then it came back around. I was like, wait a minute, like you can do both.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They're incredible drummers with incredible chops and incredible taste. And that's probably the that's probably my if I ever grow up, that's what I'm gonna shoot for.
I, I find
Get
one
my
thing.
chops.
I find one thing that's really kind of weird though is like I I do see, and this is one thing that I rail on, not rail on, but I really get on drummers' cases about don't look at the grid.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it feels good, don't look at the grid. But when I
Mm-hmm.
do work more on chops and then I see myself on the grid, it is more ahead than I normally am.
Interesting.
And I find that frustrating to me,
Mm-hmm.
even though it still sounds good, but I'm like, wait a minute, I'm changing my inner clock a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to find a balance of in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because you're taught to you got to bury the click, and you got to keep it tight and precise and clean, and which is all great, but yeah, no one's sampling those measures. Maybe not no one, but I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and the other thing too, I feel like that stuff, the stuff that's super hyper precise, hyper clean, it's really easy to program. I mean, like,
I love that point. Yep.
you know what I mean? Like anyone can do that now. It's yeah, it's weird. It's people, people want the imperfections. They want I had a producer and we were doing a session the other day, and he was talking about he was equating it to a printing press, and my parents ran a printing company when I was a kid, so I worked there all through high school and a little bit into college. That was kind of my after school job and summer job working in a printing company, which had nothing to do with this, and it taught me that I'd rather be a musician than work in a printing factory. But so I was talking about the old-fashioned letterpress, where they would, put a sheet of paper down, put these little lead blocks that would press the type into the paper. And he was saying back in the old days, the really skilled guys could do it just so that you would only get the ink and not the indentation. They were just so their touch was so great on this letterpress that just get the ink, nothing else. And nowadays, if you're going to do letterpress, you want them to crank it down because you want to actually see the indentation. You want to know this was a human thing made by a human being one at a time, cranking on this letterpress. And for him, that was kind of like the drum tracks today. He didn't want like anyone can do perfect. Anyone can do, the machine can do perfect. He wants I forget what it's called, the printer's kiss or the kiss. Like it was the human touch. He wants to hear like, oh yeah, I hired a real live drummer in a real live studio, and these are real live microphones capturing that,
Right.
and that's what the song is. So
So what does that mean to you? How does that translate to you? Does that mean it's a swing that you're putting into it, or is it literally imperfections sometimes, maybe on backbeats, or what? How does that translate to like how you you know
it's
how you put it down?
it's it's song by song. I mean, it has to be. It's song by song. Um, and there are definitely times that I'm just quantizing my parts because I know for the fact, it's young producers only worked with loops and everything else is quantized. And if I play loose, what I think sounds and feels good, they're going to hear it as, oh, this sounds awful. This needs to be quantized. I mean, these. So, I've definitely had to try to figure out on a track by track basis what do you want from these drums. Are you expecting it's going to be like slate drums and it's somebody else's different version of slate drums, or do you really want me to just go all full out human? So I can't really answer that on a broad basis, but it's, I mean, I want to basically, left to my own devices, I want to sound like Al Jackson. I mean, that's kind of the first drummer that caught me. So kind of left to my own devices. That's sort of how it is. It's not. Um,
Right. There's no broad strokes. It's by the song.
yeah,
It's the references that are given to you.
yeah. Reference tracks are huge, and I heard you mention that as well.
Yeah.
That yeah, it's, I mean, it's and especially at a when you get to a certain level with these producers, they know exactly what they want for the drums. You know what I mean? And you maybe you can add a little one extra 16th note here on measure 3 of the 4 measure loop, and like, oh yeah, no, okay, that stays. But
Yeah. Yeah.
most of the time they know what they want. And yeah, so
All right. So
unless,
tell me about your room. You been in?
oh yeah, um, it's a 20 by 20. So I'm in an old leather factory. It's this whole old brick complex going back to I think 1850, parts of it. So I'm in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Okay.
It's really crusty. It's kind of the Wild West. It's the very last thing of like it in Hoboken. Hoboken's an old industrial town. Um, there's a former Wonder Bread factory. They used to make Tootsie Rolls here. BASF, the chemical company, had, there was an oil refinery in this town. It's right across the river from New York City. And so I found this room. I had another studio in another decrepit old factory building in the basement that was totally flooded in Hurricane Irene. And so I found this room. Uh, it's the old executive's office of the whole complex, and I think it's something like 100,000 feet in this complex. So Yola Tango's here, Sonic Youth used to be here, a bunch of creative people. So it's a great spot, but you sort of get what you pay for, which is not much in this joint. So when I moved in, this room was literally a dump. I mean, there was like abandoned toilets and trash. So I had to completely clear it out. I was on a tight timetable because I lost my old studio. Everything was insured, so I was able to build this, but I was out of commission for months.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got it set up so that I'll show you. I don't have much leverage here. There's a light. Let's see what I can hear.
Oh yeah.
So got my kid over there.
Recognize
Um,
it now.
what's that?
I said I recognize it a little bit now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Pictures. Yeah.
So, I tried to set it up so that I could get as much sonic variety as I could, with given, this is what I have to work with. I can put mics out in the hall down there, and depending on what's going on out in the rest of the building, sometimes it picks up, sometimes it doesn't. But you were talking about trying to do um, the Headley Grange sound, the Bonham.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, trying to kind of been trying to do the same thing. Get that sort of one end of the spectrum, get that sound, which I can get somewhere with a
Mhm.
lot of work. I can get pretty close, and down to the ultra tight, dry, dead '70s drum booth thing, and then kind of everything in between.
Right.
Um,
But this room
so
is a little more suited for the dry thing.
what's that?
This your room is a little more suited for the drier.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I don't have the room sounds okay. I mean, it's I've done a bunch of treatment and I've got some different acoustic treatments, a bunch of stuff behind the drums from GIK.
Yep.
But yeah, it's not the power station. It's not it's a project studio,
Right.
and on on a working drummer budget. So, um,
You
but
know,
you know,
it's funny though because I feel like I think we all I say this. I'm like, oh, it's not Sense Sound, it's not Henson, but in reality, like you well I you just called it a project studio, but in reality, it's not a project studio.
true. It's
Like
not. It's
like
where I work.
it's like well, it's where you work and it's where people are getting real radio ready tracks from,
True.
and like
True.
it's you know I mean, it just kind of hit me when you said, "Oh, it's just a project studio," and I'm thinking like, well, I mean, I feel similarly because I'm sitting in my garage and my house is
Right.
20 feet there. But in
Right.
reality, where this stuff ends up, it's not a. These are not home studio demo rooms
That's a
anymore.
good point.
Like
That's a good point.
this is the way it is, and no one gets to go to Power Station anymore. Not really, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I mean, the budgets are. Who can afford that?
Yeah. So we're the kind of new reality of the power station or those places where we're it's up to us to do what we can to create those sounds in the
Right.
rooms that we're afforded to be in.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. I take it back. I mean, I love my studio. I absolutely love this place.
That's what I mean. It's like you learn to work with it. I mean, and what you just said is you're doing everything you can to be able
Right.
to give the
Stretch
place that
and
space to do whatever you can to it. It's not like anybody. It's not like James Brown was going to Headley Grange to try to get the funky drummer.
right. Right.
It's like, it just happened to be the space that they were in. But
Right.
but you're trying to do like everything that you can do to be a working drummer in the room that you're is affordable and good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a 15-minute walk from my apartment. So, um,
Yeah.
even better because I don't want to drive and lose my parking spot in this town,
Right. Right. Right.
which is
Right.
huge. So,
You got a studio. Do you got so was it Ken, the engineer that you started working with the
yeah. Yeah.
okay, so you started working with Ken and then at some point in there you thought, "Oh, I'm going to start to get my own room and do some of my own thing."
Yeah. So I did work for Ken, and there wasn't enough session work to pay the bills. So I actually started renovating houses at that point, and ended up doing some studio renovation, which definitely helped put this place together. Um, and what I realized was that Ken works out of his house as well, and he has for 20 years. And I realized that anytime we would do a drum track, it would totally shut down his entire studio. I mean, because drums are loud, and he couldn't work. He could only work on what we're doing, and his production partner, he couldn't work because I would have to take up his room, and just sort of the whole neighborhood couldn't work because it was drumming in his house. Um, so it did kind of hit me that it is time to find my own space. So this was around 2008, I think 2007, 2008. I found my first room, and this was I didn't know any. I mean, I knew about recording from being in studios and watching, but I didn't know how to use Logic. I didn't know how to use. I barely knew which end of a microphone you point at the drums. So I started with a little Mackie Onyx board, which had I think 8 channels, and just kind of learned how to do it from there. And it was a little concrete basement. The ceiling was about 6.5 feet high. Not ideal for drums. It actually ended up. I mean, tracks from that little super crappy studio where there was a huge leak in the back of the room, so I had to build this whole channel system of plastic tarps to drain the water so it wouldn't, so kind of go into this grate at the back,
Wow.
and with dehumidifiers. It was I mean, it was really cheap, and it
Right.
was a place to kind of learn how to do this stuff. And and tracks on, what record was it? It was I think it was a Kanye record or something. I mean, I actually got some of my tracks from there that Ken mixed, and they ended up on real records. So,
Wow.
um, it was a hellhole. Never the kind of place I would want to put on camera, or definitely not bring clients. My wife was there once and said, "This is you need. I don't like you being here." There was a wallpaper factory upstairs, and I mean, I would walk in the door to get to my studio, and just the chemical smell was
Wow.
insane.
Wow.
Um, so it was then under 3 feet of water, and like I said, in the hurricane, and I mean that water, I can
Blessing.
only
God.
begin. Oh my God, one sip of that and you're dead
Wow.
instantly. But
So
yeah, so
you started to engineer with like obviously probably fairly minimal miking through that mini
yeah,
through that Mackie, and then they would go to Ken, and would you discuss like, hey, you could do this a little better, you could do this a little better, or was there like a some of that?
yeah, you know, I mean, and the thing for Ken, those the timetables were immediate. I mean, there was no, um, there was trial by fire. I mean, there were, you know, they'd be screaming, "Hey, we need these samples immediately!" So that filters down to me. I'm like, where are the fucking drums?
Yeah,
So it was, okay, try a bunch of stuff, and that's kind of when I really got into doing a lot of shootouts on my own. When I was not in the heat of battle, just trying to figure this stuff out. I shoot out. I think anybody who wants to record drums has got to do just an insane amount of shootouts on their own and just learn how this stuff works.
right.
Um,
Or make work what you have so you understand
yeah,
what it does, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, for example, I learned I had a Audio Technica 4050 condenser and the API 3124 preamp, and I was tracking tambourine, and I tried a couple different mics, and that one sounded so bad. I thought that something had broken or somebody was messing with me. It just didn't translate at all. And the other mics worked, and that like, okay, right, I can't use that mic, which sounds really good on other things, on tambourine with the API. You know, check, got it. There's one down. Now, how many million more variables are there? But yeah, I mean, I still do them. Um, not as much. After a while, I kind of figured out what works, and
You know your gear, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I still go for. I mean, I'm actually. I still goof around with drums a little bit. I found an old '70s concert tom set, which I'm in the process of fixing up right now,
Just look
and which is fun. It's kind of nice to get back to my roots of uh, part of what. So when kind of in the late '90s and all through the 2000s, the other thing I was doing, so I was playing with the band first, then I moved out here and was working for Ken, and renovating houses. But the other thing I was doing was I started buying and selling old drums on eBay, and got really into doing that. And I mean, I don't know how many drums, and hundreds of snare drums, many dozens of kits, every bit you can imagine to this stuff.
okay.
Um,
I wonder if I bought anything from you.
it's it's possible. I mean, I sold a lot of shit over
Yeah.
the years,
Yeah.
and that was a big part of my education too. Just figuring out, because of course I would take these old drums, fix them up. I'd want to hit them and see what they sound like, and I just discovering that the difference between what collectors want and what sounds good. I mean, there's a huge gulf. I mean, the stuff that collectors would be drooling over that would sell for $1,000 snare drum or $2,000 hit kit, and hit, I'm like, ugh, you know, that's not for me. Um,
Yep. My favorite
so
kits have always been between 500 and $1,000. Those are
right,
always the ones that sound the best and have lasted the longest for me.
right, right. I
Yeah.
you know I've played GMS drums since the early 90s,
Mhm.
and they're not cheap drums, and they sound great. They sound awesome. And mainly that's what I'm using tracking. But I have a $25 PV bass drum that sounds incredible,
Yeah.
and a $35 nameless Japanese drum that sounds just like Al Jackson at Stax. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it's fun. It was good for me to kind of be able to separate. There's so much misinformation, like a place like Gear Slots or these audio engineering forums or drummers forums. Like, oh my God, if you don't have solid bronze cast snare drum hoops, you're shit, and your drums are never going to sound good. And
Right.
you try a drum, it's $2,000 drum with $1,000 hoops. Eh, you know,
Right.
whatever. It's
Right.
loud.
Right. Right.
But and then you hit the $35 drum you find in the pawn shop. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll use that.
Or it has something unique that something, maybe overly engineered doesn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
Um,
a character.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I would discover too that I would go to sessions and show up with the expensive drums and the multi-thousand-dollar blah blah blah, and um, to set up for the session, and the producer's like, okay, and then pull out some ancient crusty marching bass drum. Like, oh wow, what's that? Oh, that, yeah, let's use that. That's the drum with character, and
I hear this story over and over from people.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
I mean,
I
there is obviously a spot for the super pristine, the whole thing, and I do it, and you do it too.
mhm,
But
yeah,
there's just as much of a spot for the crusty character thing, and
yeah,
I think in the long run, those win out a lot.
yeah, yeah,
Like, it's just that's got something unique that ends up in a song that helps make a song unique, if the
yeah,
song's good.
yeah, yeah. I would agree. I mean, one day I just went to the hardware store and bought a bunch of chains and lengths of brass toilet chains, and man, that brass toilet chain, you loop it up and put it on a snare drum, it sounds great. I mean, it adds all this grit and character to any drum. It was like $2 worth of brass toilet plunger chain, and you know they don't really advertise that in the drummer magazines, but
Right.
um, yeah, I think it's cool. I just over the years, I've talked to other, and I went through this myself of like, oh my God, it's going to cost so much money to do this, and I've got to have this amazing stuff and amazing preamps and amazing converters, and before I do it, like, eh, you don't really. I mean, you know, work with what you got and
Yeah.
be creative, and you know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
All right, I'm gonna hit stop. Interview's over. No.
oh, that's it, game over.
The money line. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm the exact same way. At a certain point, especially when I started to really dive into like, can I do a when the levee break things in my room, and can I get it
Mhm.
really convincing? That's when it really started to dawn on me. Is like, oh my God, if I just get to know my stuff,
Yeah,
there's so many possibilities.
yeah,
It's not about being hung up on, I don't have this, I don't have that.
right,
Well, I do have this, and if I just dive in, if I keep working, I'm gonna get pretty close.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And if I
yeah,
don't, I'm probably gonna end up with something cool at least.
right, right, and unique to you and your studio.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So, are you using a lot of analog outboard?
All my outboard is analog. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I'm curious, are you tracking and kind of printing your effects to tape or to digital
Uh,
tape?
Sometimes there's usually, if I'm doing that, it's usually coming from one particular
Hmm.
mic.
Right.
And then again, it depends on the song.
Hmm.
And it depends on who I'm working for. If I
Right.
know I can go that route, then I do that.
Right.
I would say most of the time, though, I'm creating the effect. Are we talking like outlandish effects, like, or are we talking like compression and EQ?
Yeah, like basic compression, EQ,
Oh no, I'm printing that.
reverb. Okay.
Yeah,
You're what?
I'm
I'm sorry.
printing
Oh,
that stuff.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Cool.
Sorry, I keep messing with my mic pre-level here because. Yeah, that stuff I print.
Okay.
I feel like I've done enough trial and error over the years where I trust myself to not, if something needs to be overcompressed, then there's an option to either not use it for someone, let's say a room mic, or it's going to be appropriate.
Right, right,
You know
right,
what I mean? I mean, I definitely had some complaints over the years of like, hey man, next time you do something, can you back off the compression on your room mics?
right.
Because I was
Okay.
like, oh, it sounds awesome. But in reality, when somebody's mixing it, they're like, yeah, sorry, dude, this is,
Yeah,
I overdid it, you overbaked it. Um, but no, all compression and EQ, I'm printing. I will EQ after the fact if I feel like it needs more, and I
mm-hmm,
will give people the option.
mm-hmm,
But most, I would say 90% of the time, I'm sending those type of effects to them.
mm-hmm.
And then
Gotcha.
if it's a parallel compression or a delay or a big verb, then that's on a separate channel that they can choose to use or not.
Right, right, right. Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah,
When I started my own space, I kind of had to make this. I just sort of made a distinction of I'm just going to focus on tracking and not mixing. And I just saw how much it still is a lot of money to build a tracking room and track drums. You need a lot of stuff, and so looking at that, and then looking at the next level after that of being the mix it guy, and like, oh man, that's I'm just going to focus on the tracking for now.
mhm,
Um, so I'm getting to the point now where I'm starting to do a little bit more. I'm really still only qualified as a ref mix engineer, so I don't really, you know, I'm not going to go crazy with it, but it is becoming more and more, especially those times when you hear the final track and you hear that they just used your rough mix as the final drum mix, and oh god,
mhm.
for me there's nothing worse. Like, no, that was you should have mixed those drums.
Yeah,
Really.
that's big for me. Is I love mix, like if I write something either by myself or with a friend, and I try to get, like, I kind of have a prog project that I've been working on with a friend, and
Cool.
I've been mixing it, and it's okay. It's okay. But then I take it to a car, and it's almost not even so much uh sonics. It's about, oh man, this whole section dropped way too much in volume.
Right. Right.
And it's not about slamming it either, just like making everything like flatline. It's about like, oh man, I need to get this whole section equal to the other
Yeah.
thing. And like to me, that's way beyond my knowledge at some point,
Yeah.
or getting a tune to grow at the end and not, just like having dynamics, but not, it can't be too much for, recorded music. It's not
Yeah.
classical music.
Right. 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 Yeah. Because everyone thinks, well, you got to pile on the stuff, and then you get mud if you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah. I have so much respect for real mix engineers.
Yeah.
It's I'm always happy to have somebody else do that.
Yeah. But that stuff always informs my sonics later. Even though I'm kind of like mediocre at it, it helps my drum engineering and the back end,
Mm-hmm.
or on the front
Mm-hmm.
end, I should say, because oh, I could do this better. Oh, I'm it's okay to go a little more high end on these toms for this type of thing.
Right.
I know they need
Right.
to
Right.
stick out more, so I get less afraid,
Yeah, I feel really thankful that I have been able to sit there and watch as engineers mix my drums with the rest of a track,
Right.
and really just watch. Right. Okay. So what I see what they're doing. Right. That mic is too. It's catching too much boom, or it wasn't close enough to the shell, or it, um, kind of seeing all those things in context with all the other instruments. Um,
Right.
um, was really instructive for me, just to figure out. Okay. Right. So just because I have a lot of mics up, if none of them are pointing at the right thing, who cares? It's um,
Right.
and trying to always find that the one mic that can capture the whole kit. Even if everything else doesn't work, you've got one mic that's going to crush it, and then augment it with all the other close mics and through mics and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. I'm still curious about the kind of your career path after. So you got this room,
Mm-hmm.
and was there a certain point where, was this, a lot of your career started through working with Ken, and then expanded from there,
Yeah,
or kind of where, like the recording side of it, like that
yeah,
that
um,
lineage.
sure. It was. let's see. Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, I owe Ken a lot. He took me under his wing early on and just sort of showed me the ropes and then sent me out into the world. And so um, I was doing a lot of in the 2000s. I was just doing a ton of indie artists. Just working with the $100 nights at the bitter end or um, the living room or whatever, and just playing with. I lost track of how many different indie artists I would work with, and just trying to. A lot of that was going to smaller studios in Brooklyn and recording, the whole band in a room kind of thing, or all of that, and then um, augmenting that with the eBay stuff, especially later on in the 2000s, and then so when the global crash happened in around 2008, 2009, and all of a sudden I was losing my shirt trying to sell drums on eBay. Um, so well, I could lose my shirt selling drums on eBay, or I could start the studio, and that's when um, that's kind of when I made that shift. I'm really glad I did because it was kind of the catalyst, and I feel like we in the last year for everybody we're in kind of a similar. That was a big catalyst for me. It was okay, time to change, new plan, and actually that plan set me up for today. I mean, I feel like every drummer out there in the last year is like, oh fuck, I can't play. Their live gigs are gone. I got to learn how to be a studio drummer. I got to set up a room like we have,
Yep.
and I'm thankful to be sort of 12 years down the road. I'm not just learning, but it can all be done, and I was helping my friend set up his studio, and he just had his first paying customer this past week. Like, oh, great, it can be done, and he's working on it for 6 months. So,
Yeah.
um, but so to get back to your question, so I started my studio, still playing with a bunch of people. The kind of the big catalyst, the big change for me was I worked on Girl on Fire with Ken, and so we had to recreate Bobby Chenard's drums. I think recorded at the Power Station, and so I shot a little video. I had my little, I think it was an iPhone 4, old crappy iPhone, and then one of those little flip cameras, the digital flip camera. So um, recording at Alicia Studios, and I asked if it was okay if I took a little video, and then so I'd never put a video together. Um, so I had an assistant at the time who was helping me, um, who was a little more digital inclined than I was because he was 20 years younger. So I made him learn how to use iMovie, and we put this video together about how we made the Alicia Keys track.
Oh wow.
And so that kind of took off. That video did really well. Mono Drummer ran it for a while, and so from that kind of turned into. Ken said, "Oh, great, you're a video producer now. I want you to make a video for my school, or shoot a bunch of videos for my music school." So
Wow.
we thought shot literally thousands of videos in this space. Um, so for a while I was doing, my income started as only live, then it was live in studio, and then it was live studio and video production. Um, and then now it's back to just only studio. The my live stuff disappeared a year ago.
Right.
Um, yeah, so but and that was great too because we were doing keys, guitar, bass, vocals, drums, um, and in a really wide range of styles and music. Um, so and because it was with Ken, I would get to do. So we did a little course on how to play the funky drummer and how to play Back in Black and how to play Chameleon by Herbie Hancock and some other things like that. And each one of these courses, I would do a little video on here's how to get the sound, and we would mix it so it sounded right. So we'd teach here's how you play funky drummer, and you'd hear the sounds, and I would teach it with the funky drummer sounds. Um, just all that stuff kind of became, I sort of each month I would be piecing my income together from all these different sources,
Yep.
and but I've been based out of this room for 10 years now, and that's kind of I didn't I pretty much stopped traveling, stopped the touring when my son was born. He was born. He's 10 now.
Okay.
So that's when I got out of. I know you have two kids, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I just started booking more. Um, I couldn't do so much of the starving singer songwriters in the city, so I took cover gigs,
Right.
and that was really interesting. I'd never really done that before. I'd always been doing original stuff, which was great. I'm really glad I did it, but it was um, I played in a modern country cover band. And I didn't know anything about country, even though I'm from Indiana and technically should. It was not a scene I was into. Um, and I learned hundreds of these tunes, and it was like everything is slow, groovy rock at 72 BPM.
Right.
Um, and it was great. I just put on a click track, played 4 hours of this stuff a night down to the Jersey Shore,
Right.
and I that was so good for my time too, and just
Yeah.
just like having to learn somebody else's tracks. I mean, and the drummers in the Nashville are amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, these tracks are great. I learned so much for that, and then joined a expensive wedding band, and had to learn how to play these super pop songs that are um, nothing but programmed drums and weird programmed parts, and trying to make sense on a little 4-piece kit with a wedding band and with a horn section.
And
Um,
did learning that stuff influence your knowledge of sounds with those
yeah.
that
Oh yeah.
yeah,
How do you get the the clap sound or the finger snap or the um,
the
the
country
sounds
stuff
of
too.
what's that?
The country stuff too.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, um, yeah, it was interesting. I'm kind of at a point where the live stuff dried up, and I'm overnight, and it was like half of my income
Right.
overnight. A little rough. But on the other side of this, I'm kind of rethinking. I think I am going back more to the original stuff. I I've never had so much quality family time in my life as the past year.
Right.
Um, because I was gone every weekend. And in the summertime, I'd be have 4 or 5 shows a week, plus be at the studio nonstop.
Right.
And I really enjoyed this past year. Friday night, every Friday night we've been watching the Star Wars series. Starting episode 1 up through.
Right.
Like I never did that. I was gone. I was just gone.
Right.
And so I on the other side of this, and I feel like I'm kind of seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, that there will be gigs again with people in a room, and
Right.
yeah, I'm looking forward to that, but I don't want to go back to how I was doing it before.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. I mean, I, I don't know if I think it'll be a long time till it was like it was
Yeah,
regardless,
yeah,
you know, on that subject. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um so like how so you're pretty like are you recording modern country stuff at all as like since you're
No,
doing these gigs? No, really.
no, no. It was just sort of this kind of separate thing.
Okay.
Um, no, I mean I've done one or two, but that's not really, my most of my recording stuff. It's loops and break beats, um, a lot of singer songwriter stuff, and then a lot of kind of hip hop, soul, R&B. That would be that's kind of my main recording
Okay.
stuff these days.
Right. That's mainly because the producers that call you. Is
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm I don't know. It's all cool. I like all the music. I don't know. I
Right.
don't know what it is.
Right.
I
And
don't have a,
are you so with the getting the sound stuff, that's ongoing? That's like constantly happening?
yeah, yeah. So it's actually creating the sound now. We
Okay.
realized we weren't actually going out and getting the sounds. We were actually creating it from scratch. So in January we changed the title over.
Okay.
Yeah. So I work with my production partner Cooper Anderson, who I met Cooper through Ken as well. We started working with Ken around the same time. So Cooper's an amazing mix engineer and producer. So he kind of handles that end. And yeah, we it's built the site because I wanted the site that was I wanted 12 years ago when I was first starting to learn this stuff.
Right.
Just what is a microphone? What's the difference between a ribbon and a dynamic? What's a
Right.
why do you use one and not the other?
Right.
And and how are you supposed to mix these things? All of that stuff.
Right.
Um, and and part of it too is we just sort of follow. A lot of the times, a lot of the lessons we do, somebody comes in and they want, um, I mean, the last thing was synthwave. Somebody wanted a synthwave track, so I, put a kit together, did their track, and like, these are cool sounds. Let's do we'll do a lesson on synthwave. So we've been obsessed with synthwave, we're building a song from scratch. We're going live tonight
Oh,
with
cool.
adding vocals and everything. Um, and it's all it kind of all goes back to the reference tracks, as you were saying. It's the track comes in and the synthwave kit doesn't work at all for the neo soul kit, which doesn't work at all for the super lo-fi grungy indie thing,
Right.
which doesn't work for the hip hop thing.
Right.
So I do find I'm just constantly shifting stuff around in here,
Hmm.
and so once we like, oh, I want to share this kit with the world.
Right. Right.
It's
Right.
Queen drums, and
It's inspiring. Yeah. Totally. Totally.
yeah.
And
So
do you remember the kind of the formulas? Like if you're like, oh, I did that thing 3 weeks ago,
oh yeah,
I gotta go. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, absolutely. Done it long enough. I know the
Right.
gear. I know,
Right.
here's my Clyde snare. Here's my Bonham snare. Here's my,
Right.
Ringo.
Right.
Um, yeah. So, uh, actually, I really appreciated you did the series on the Phil Collins sound, which is awesome. You nailed it, and I
Oh,
love the attention to detail.
thanks.
Absolutely loved it.
That was
Um,
yeah, that was pretty funny because I was just well, I mean, there's a kind of a longer story leading up to it, but when I finally did it, I was like, okay, I got to go in hard because, and I
yeah,
think it was a time where I wasn't busy. Like I knew I wasn't going to be busy. It was maybe over like a holiday or something.
right,
I could just really not have to break the kit down to do other things
right.
and just get deep. And then that uh well there's the in the air tonight thing, which I actually think I could do better now than I did
Yeah,
it then.
sure.
Uh,
I'm the
but
same
then
way with the funky drummer.
yeah, but then the God, why am I blanking? The other tune I did, uh, I don't care anymore. Like
Okay,
that, even when I was a kid, before I was ever really thinking about recording drums, I was playing and I was fascinated with drums, but that track always fascinated me because there was those layers of the sound happening, and of course, I wasn't thinking technically about that process, but I was like, it keeps changing. You know what I mean?
right.
And then as a young like as a someone who was working in here, I would put that on in the car and I would be like, what is happening? And then when I decided to try to go after it, I really was like, okay, what is happening in here? And the fact that there's like three layers of that sound in there, but it's really the same thing
Is
over and
that
over.
video? Is that video still? I never saw that one. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, there is. There's like the super dry thing, there's a gated reverb sound, and then there's the room sound that comes in.
Okay,
And they're all and then at the end they're all happening.
okay,
You really listen to it, there's like three different layers of it, of that one overdubbed the main track, and then
right,
everything else is overdubbed too, which was huge to go like, oh wait, they didn't do this at the same time, they didn't do this
right,
at the same time.
right.
and
Uh,
and then trying to record cymbals in there and going like, there's no way they recorded the cymbals
right.
with the toms. It just doesn't work, even no matter what size room it is, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so a couple things. eh, so did you shoot a video on your
Yeah.
journey there? Or is that still up? Because I want to watch that. That sounds
Yeah,
cool.
it's up
So,
there. Yeah, yeah.
okay. Oh, is it on YouTube?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I'll find that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's another thing that I want to stress to any drummer who's watching this and who wants to be recording themselves is think about the cymbals and think really hard about whether you should track them at the same time you track everything else.
Yeah.
And often you can, but sometimes it sounds so much better if you don't. So much better. You just
How often do you feel like you're doing that?
maybe half my productions. Well, that's not true. It goes in waves, and
Yeah.
the stuff that's really just live. It's supposed to be live. I wouldn't do that.
Right.
But if there's any layering whatsoever, or if it has anything to do with kind of a modern pop sensibility, I'm almost always overdubbing crash cymbals.
Mhm.
Occasionally overdubbing hi hats too, just because I mean, cymbals are so they take over a mix so easily, and they take over a microphone so easily,
Yep.
and especially everybody wants big, massive sounds that are gonna you know rumble your speakers, but if your crash cymbals taking over that, you're never gonna get it
Yeah.
from your mic.
Yeah, the hi-hat thing is a daily battle for me, especially in rock tracks. Even when I play them quietly, I think part of it's my room, but even when I alter my playing to almost in a comical way to be playing the kick and snare
Right.
where it should be, but then
Yeah.
playing the hi-hat like, at a quarter of the volume as those other two, so it's very
Right.
awkward. But then, oh, that's where it finally sounds right, but it doesn't feel.
Right, you've got a 2B in your left hand and
Yeah,
7A in your left,
yeah,
or your right, and yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Uh,
But the microphones don't care.
they don't care. They don't
they're,
care.
they're very, very cruel and unyielding in that way.
They are, and then like my room is I think it's like I think my room is probably a third of the size of yours, so that
Oh
sound
wow.
bounces around even more. I mean, I'm just guessing from looking there, but my tracking room.
I'm 20 by 20.
Okay, well, my tracking room is 10 by 15 with a ceiling, not even 10 by 15 because it changes. It's like a different angles
Okay.
and stuff. But it's pretty small, but yeah.
Well, and again, as you were saying, and as we've been saying, just because it ain't Ocean Way or Power Station, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for a fact that you're getting amazing sounds out of there because I've heard them. And
It'd be curious to me. Like, I'm always interested in actually engineering myself in an actual real studio.
yeah,
And then, I'd actually be afraid of that because I might be like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing out of my room. You know what I mean?
right.
Which could be the case. It could very well be the case. Yeah.
We Cooper, my production partner, and I went up to Telefunken Microphones a few months ago and got to record in their room. And I mean, I'm not an envious person, but I definitely had room envy on. Oh man, that space. Oh my God, it sounded so good. Just you hit the drum and just perfectly balanced. And I mean, just my iPhone camera from 30 feet away. I mean, it sounds so good. My iPhone footage.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that room was incredible. The ceilings were, I don't know, 30 feet, and the
Yep.
room is
Yep.
100 by 100, and
Yep.
you know, perfectly treated. And every, oh man, I was, came back to my little 20 by 20, like, that sucks.
I was in a friend's studio 2 days ago. It's a home studio, but he built it out. It's a pretty large space, and it was the same thing. He has incredible gear. Drums are great. I didn't have to bring anything except sticks, but it was the same thing. I was just playing, getting sounds for him, and I was just like, oh, right, this is this would be a luxury. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But on the other hand, if our rooms were just on, like you put a cardboard box and it sounds amazing, and you throw any mic and it's just going to sound good, maybe we wouldn't have had to spend so much time figuring out how to get good sounds out of the rooms we have. So
yeah.
um,
And it's about character. It's not like, I mean, so many of the recordings that we love, they have a character of the room. And again, we kind of touched on this earlier, and it not wasn't necessarily intentional. It just
right.
that's where they could afford to go. Like, actually, do you know what room Funky Drummer was recorded in?
Yeah, it was King Studio in Cincinnati,
Okay,
and
right, and that's a quite a well known room for that region, right?
yeah, yeah, it was a I oh man, I went so deep
Okay,
into
yeah,
researching that stuff and was obsessed with it. I still kind of am. Yeah, it was just but I think it was just a big concrete room, cinder block room. Nothing. It was not a special room by any stretch.
right. It came down to Clyde.
Yeah, Clyde and James Brown and his band, and and
Yeah.
they captured it well. And um,
And was it
yeah,
one mic?
I it was one track. There was it was an 8-track recording.
Okay.
I get to talk to Alan Leeds, who was the James Brown's tour manager back then. He found the original tracking sheet. So yeah, it was one channel for drums. We think there were maybe two mics that we have a picture of Clyde in the studio
Okay.
at that studio at the same time. And there's a mic on the kick and definitely it looks like a U47 overhead. And that's
There's a
probably
mic on
about
the
it.
kick, really.
Yeah, we think there's something. Um,
Because it's so quiet. It's
yeah,
so quiet in there.
there's. It looks like there's a kick mic, but it's kind of it's hard. It's I don't know. I'll send you the picture and you can judge for yourself. And it wasn't from the Funky Drummer session, but he said the picture he sent is pretty representative of what they look like.
Interesting.
And the Funky Drummer sound is Ludwig Superphonic snare, but Vox drums, which I thought was that blew my mind. I always assumed it was a Ludwig kit, and said no, they just pulled in their road kit, which is just red Krakow Vox drums. So I've been on a obsessive hunt for a set of 13, 16, 22 red Krakow Vox drums from the late 60s, or Trixon would work, I guess.
Right. And you have some.
No, no, there was a that floor tom was on reverb for a little while, and it wasn't very expensive. I was thinking, man, I should buy this because, maybe it was that could have been Clyde's or Jabbo's
Right.
actual road kick, and some other floor tom ended up in Florida, I think. But
Right.
what am I gonna do with one floor tom?
Right.
So,
Yeah, my recreation of Funky Drummer, I ended up with one mic and just
really? Oh, where's your? I haven't seen your recreation.
mine's on YouTube. I don't know if you should watch it, man.
Why not?
On it. But yeah, I came up with one mic and I can't. I'm trying to remember what I used. It might have been my 441, which is now broken, or maybe even my Audio Technica. I don't even remember what it was now. But I just kept moving it. I'm like,
Yeah.
God, this sounds a little closer. This sounds. I kept moving it closer to the hi-hat and farther away from the kick drum.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
finally,
Yeah.
like, okay, this is where I'm gonna get for me. You know.
So what's been? I mean, I've been obsessed with that damn track forever, and it was only in the past 10 years that I could play the break beat, and it's only in the past couple months that I can actually play the entire track from start to finish and know the parts and get through it without my arm
Yep.
falling off.
Yep.
What's your funky drummer journey been?
I mean, definitely similar. Uh, it's funny. I used to be able to play it better when I had a jazz ride cymbal right hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I let that go. Um, and I mean, mine has been again. It's like, well, where do you start? Because the beat morphs as the
Yeah.
track goes
Yeah.
over those 9 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And like, well, what part is the most authentic? And it's always funny, like, because I get comments of people go like, dude, that's not it. It's like, well, what
Or
is it? Because
yeah.
you know, um, but there's certain things that I obsess about it with. And number one is the touch of the hi-hat
Hmm.
and the driving nature of it. But the volume is just, you know, flatline, right? It's just
Yeah.
incredible. But then those buzz, like especially at the end break, where he's just, he's dropping
Oh man.
buzzes in,
Yeah.
and it's just so clean. But all I can think of
Yes.
with that is that he spent either playing that beat for hours on the road for months, or I mean, that's all I can think is this. He has that stamina because that's what he would do every night for
Yeah.
like years,
Yeah.
and then it
Super
just
nice.
turned into a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like he just started playing that, and then it just turned into a song, or that's my
Yeah.
that would be my guess. I don't.
I that's my impression, and from talking to Alan Leeds, I think he kind of confirmed that as well, and it was
Okay.
a flop when it came out, which
Oh
is
wow,
funny.
incredible.
Yeah, like it disappeared, it got nowhere, and they just forgot about it. Yeah, I'm curious to find because Alan was saying they played it on the road for several months leading up to when they recorded it,
Okay.
and that it was I think in a section of the show before James came out. So it was kind of the band would warm him up doing some instrumental stuff. So
Okay.
I've never heard, I've never seen, I don't know if it exists, but I've always wondered if there was a show tape of the band playing the funky drummer before they went in and recorded it.
Right.
And if anybody's watching this and anyone knows, please find me and tell me. Love to hear that. What that track sounded like before and actually, Alan told me that was the very last song that band recorded before they all mutinied.
Really?
that was the last thing they did. That the last thing that band with
Wow.
with the '60s lineup
Yep.
before they quit and Bootsy's band came in. It was the last thing they did was a funky drummer, one take,
Right.
no overdubs, no edits. Yeah,
It's
Clyde,
incredible.
not enough that track. He just played. I mean, if he made any mistakes, maybe they were in his head and he thought, oh, I whatever. But
Right.
holy,
I also see when you see the live footage of those Jabo and Clyde playing, and it's amazing to me because they do. I don't want to say they play loud, but they're playing as if you would play in a live setting,
yeah,
especially with minimal miking, whatever was happening back then.
yeah,
But the
yeah,
sound that's coming out is still, it's not bombastic.
right, right, right,
And
right.
that's what blows me away about seeing those guys play live. It's like, wow, they were creating this, they were in that setting, they were driving the band, they were, playing it for a dance hall or whatever,
Yeah,
but but it's still light enough where it's not taking over. You know what I mean?
right, 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 right. I I've always wondered if, yeah, I know what you mean. The Clyde's Cold Sweat solo at Boston. I, yeah. I mean, he's went
He's
into
playing.
it. I mean, and it's oh, that solo is incredible too. But part of me wonders if the reason he was playing so quietly in the studio was that um, the whole band was live, and Alan was saying it was they're all just kind of in a circle around, and
Yep.
so you had to play quietly because otherwise you're going to take over
Yeah,
everyone
he
else's room.
played for the room and for the
Yeah,
mic.
which you
Yeah.
know, going back to my own experience of in the '90s of playing as loud and as hard as I possibly could,
Mhm.
and having no conception of what playing to the room meant.
Right.
Um, it's really it just impresses me more about what they created, and the kind of musicians those guys were.
Yeah. Well,
Incredible.
I think a few things. There was a sensibility that was happening at that time. One, because you mostly played acoustically, right? So the
Right.
idea of like, hey, you have to play dynamically, otherwise you're not going to work.
Yeah.
If you're the loudest drummer, like people, you're playing in a lounge or you're playing in a nightclub or you're playing in a dance hall, and you just can't
Right.
be that, you know. And
Right.
then those guys obviously came from jazz, right? So they're not growing up like bashing.
Right.
And then I'll go out on a limb and say I'm sure James Brown had something to say about how loud you're going to play,
Yes.
and you know what I mean. And just say like I need more of you, or shut the hell up. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of those factors that went into those guys' sensibilities over years of like touring and
Yeah.
playing. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I look at Kenny, who's, I mean, nobody plays harder than Kenny, and no one's worked more than Kenny.
right,
So uh, it just goes to show there's no one path. There's no,
right,
yeah. I mean, I came off the road from Johnny Sacco when touring in a van with, Marshall stacks and all the gear and in the trailer and whatever, and then came here and suddenly had to get my gear from my third floor walk up into the city and play a club that was the size of this room.
right,
And, again, I wasn't, I didn't have the name to be able to say, no, this is my sound, and you're all in this 20-foot room gonna deal with my playing loud.
right,
It'd have to die. And,
right,
you know, I went from trying to be the loudest drummer in town to trying to be the quietest drummer in town.
right.
And then,
Well, that's a
you know,
good musical sensibility that obviously you recognize that,
well,
right? It's like,
it's pretty obvious. You want to work? Shut
well,
up.
yeah, well, exactly, right? It's like you got to adapt, and if you don't, then
Yeah.
yeah. But you got to
Yeah.
ears to it.
Yeah. It's true. And and I feel like we're all in this major you got to adapt period right now, or most of us.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, I remember, when I first got into social media, which I really, in my heart of hearts, if I could never look at social media again, I think I'd be happier. But
It is what it
that's
is.
not how the world works.
Right.
I just remember, talking to friends in the 2000s, and guys who had played on massive records, and we've all heard them our entire lives, and they just couldn't make the transition to social media, and kind of, and this, this idea of, I as best I've seen it, it's, social media means you need to give away everything you know for free, because there's no, I don't feel like, for me, there's no trade secret left. There's no, I mean, how I got the funky drummer sound, it's, I can teach you, or somebody else is going to teach you, and it's sort of this, here it is, here's what I know.
Yeah.
If you want to hire me, here's how to reach me.
Doesn't mean you can pull it off though.
Well, it's true.
Just because you're given the playbook doesn't mean you can do it. You know what I mean? It's like you could give us the Tampa Bay Buccaneers football playbook, and we could get 12 of us, and it would be a disaster, right? It's like so.
I follow Jamie Oliver on Instagram, and he can give me the recipe, and I can go get do exactly what he.
Yep.
Whose would you rather eat?
So. Yeah. So I mean, I totally agree with that sentiment, but at the same time, you still gotta put the time in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll watch Cooper mix something, and
right.
Everything he's doing, I understand what he's doing. And it's not even that. It's like, dipping a little EQ there and a little compression here, and throw this one effect on, and the end result, I know how to do every one of those things, but whose mix is going to sound better?
Right.
His or mine, and it's not going to be mine.
Right.
So, right. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm so curious to see where we all come out on the other side of this. I mean.
Yeah.
I'm proud to have. I'm keeping the lights on here.
And right, exactly. I think that's where it's at. It's like we're striving to maintain and adapting constantly, and trying to give back, right?
Yeah.
Teach, and I mean, I really enjoy. I came from a heavy music education background, and I despised it at a certain point in my life. I couldn't get far enough away from it. But now I'm happy because I feel like I have skills to give back.
Yeah.
Because some people can't tell you what they're doing.
Right.
But I'm glad I can share, because I feel like I have something to share.
Right.
I didn't for a long time, but I think part of the adaptation, whether it's social media or giving away everything that it's like, well, I feel like I have something relevant to say, I hope, or at least to some people.
Yeah. Well, for starters, so what's the SM7 down by between the kick and snare?
Right.
or unless that's a trade secret, which I understand.
Well, no, this is what I heard, and it's all conjecture. I heard that was a Mark Ronson mic placement for the Amy Winehouse back to black.
Yes. At Daptone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I heard. I don't know. Okay. I don't know where I heard. I don't remember the source. Someone told me that, and I use that all the time. Now, no one ever said it was an SM7 because I put different microphones there.
Mm-hmm.
But I had accidentally left this mic up in my room with a vocal level, like from this, and it was in my room, and it was overdriving. And I was like, oh my God, this mic actually sounds good overdriven.
Right.
And I thought, oh, I'm going to try it in that spot.
Right.
So trial by accident. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna corroborate your story a little bit. So I started working with every once in a while I'll do sessions for Dave Tozer, who is John Legend's producer.
Okay.
And Dave used to do a lot of stuff at Daptone with Homer Steinweiss.
Okay.
And so the first session I did for Dave, I think Homer couldn't do it, so he called me, and that was the first time I saw in that exact same position he was using the AEA R84. Okay. And he said, and it was down low, kind of in between the middle of the kick snare hat.
Yep.
And it sounded great. It was a perfect single picture version of the kick snare hat sound. It didn't really get any. If you went to the floor tom, it disappeared. But
right.
It was a great spot. And so I learned the same thing. Yeah. So for me, it's the AEA sometimes in that spot.
Okay.
But Dave and his engineer, oh shoot, I apologize, Chris, his engineer, they also do a thing, kind of a similar thing. So they came here for a session. It was actually one of my only modern country sessions with
Okay.
a guy Dave was producing. So they had a similar mic, and we used a 414, but it was down. It was instead of a snare bottom mic, just right by the snare. They had it down, sort of almost by my shin, kind of pointing up at the snare drum, and they said it. I mean, it definitely caught a lot of kick drum, but it was a really this kind of gooey picture of the snare drum, and it wasn't so rattly, kind of harsh and rattly as just the snare bottom mic
Right.
right there.
Was it in
And
figure eight?
what's that?
Was it in figure eight? The 414?
I think it was just cardioid, in
Okay.
cardioid, and but it was down, kind of down by the hi hat,
Yep.
like the base of the hi hat stand, pointing sort of up at the snare,
Right.
several, about that far back.
Okay.
And it was great. That was a really cool position that I'd never in a million years thought of, and it just adds this glue to the whole track, and that kind of started explaining some of. I mean, because Dave gets some great drum sounds,
Yeah.
and that and they all kind of just, it's like this. They've all sort of melted together in this
Right.
cool way.
Right.
So
I actually did a Patreon video recently on a similar thing, which is 414 in figure eight, but under the snare, but also facing the batter head of the kick.
okay, so let me think here. So it's under the snare.
So
So
it's like in between the kick and the batter head of the snare. I'm sorry, batter head of the under the snare,
okay, under the snare.
but the other side is facing the kick batter head.
And where are the knolls facing?
Uh, it's the one side is facing the bottom snare, one side is facing.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So the knolls are kind of facing. Yeah, okay,
It's
I
almost
gotcha.
as if you were like recording in stereo, even though you're not, right?
Right.
And that's pretty cool because there's so many things you can do. Like EQ wise, you can veer it more toward the kick or more
Mm-hmm.
toward the bottom snare, or gate it, or compress the shit out of it, and it's like it gets that gooey thing that you're talking about.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a really interesting thing. And it's kind of funny because it works for a lot of things, but then sometimes you're just like, this is just not but it works
I,
for a lot of things. Yeah.
yeah. I love that when it's so plainly obvious that the mic doesn't work. I mean, I having 24/7 lockout of your own studio is great because I can leave all this crap set up and set up way too many mics, and they're always live, and every time I record I just record them all. But
Yep.
it's so the exact same mics, same drummer, same room, different song. It doesn't work at all.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, it's a cool thing. So shootout time.
Yeah. All right.
Find the one that does.
We're gonna have to. We'll be texting more after this. It's like, hey man, try this. Yeah. Yeah. But man, thanks for taking the time.
Oh man, it's been a pleasure.
This is really
Yeah, I
so
believe we have more mutual friends than. Do you work with Asher?
the band.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Josh was the first friend I made when I moved to Hoboken.
Oh no way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was roommates with those guys at NAM back when at the last NAM before.
Okay. I did a track for them a few years ago at a friend's studio, but then and then we were gonna go back there, and then COVID hit, and I ended up doing things here,
Okay.
and I've done a handful of things this year, or 2020 and 2021 now.
Yeah. Say hello to those guys for me.
Yeah, yeah, and Ethan is amazing, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, so is Josh,
Yeah.
and they're it's really fun. It's really fun. They're creative dudes. Yeah.
That's cool. That's really
Wow,
cool.
that's crazy. Okay, I'll tell him. I'll tell him
Please do.
we made a connection. It's amazing.
It's a small world.
Yeah.
Small world of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blair, thanks, man. It's great to be. And as we were saying early on, man, I definitely feel we are kindred spirits on
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff. I
Yeah.
really dig what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely be we'll be talking more, man. It's like, tell me what's happening there. What are you doing?
I look forward to it, and hopefully, maybe NAMM 2022. I'll see you in LA.
And I hope I come to New York and do a gig, and then we can grab coffee.
Gig. Remember those?
Years. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I have 3 on the calendar
Yeah.
in the summer and fall, and I figure, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
should be legal.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, Dylan, have a great day, man.
Great to talk to you. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.